Hi, it's your pal Steamed Hams. Join me every week on the Unforgettable Luncheon as we discuss topics in the nerd world like gaming, comics, cartoons, and whatever else may cross my mind. You can find me on the socials as SteamedHams81 on Twitch, Twitter, and Instagram, and YouTube. You can also find me as the Unforgettable Luncheon on Facebook. And check out Steamed Hams Merchtorium, the link to which will be in the description of this podcast. The Unforgettable Luncheon, nerd comedy at its okayest. The Unforgettable Luncheon. At this time of year, at this time of day, in this part of the country, localized entirely within this podcast. May you see it? No, but you can listen to it. Hi, it's your old pal Steamed Hams here with another unforgettable luncheon. The Simpsons. This long running animated series about a family in Everytown, USA, aka Springfield, has captivated us for generations. Going on for 34 seasons and counting right now. It's been going longer than some of us have even been alive. Not as long as me. I was still a kid when it came out. It premiered in 1987 as a series of shorts on the Tracy Ullman Show, used as bumpers before and after the commercial breaks. Showcasing a wacky family with semi-normal situations, i.e. Homer freaking out in the middle of the night and saying, "Hey kids, let's get into the bomb shelter," because it turns out to be a drill, or Bart pretending to be an undersea diver when he's taking his, nightly bath. The show did premiere as its own series with a Christmas episode in 1989 entitled Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire, which actually detailed how they came upon their dog, Santa's Little Helper. The show, in its first season or two, did deal with more realistic situations, such as, kids having trouble with bullies, job loss and getting a new job, and things of that nature. Family discourse, family therapy. They did deal with Dr. Marvin Monroe. But as the series went on, it did honestly get increasingly more ridiculous. Obviously the first season is kind of like that template to where they haven't fleshed the characters out. So things like, Lenny and Carl started out as pretty much just background characters who didn't have any real personality whatsoever. Obviously now they're recurring characters. Things such as Lenny can't stop getting hit in the eye with things. He's not supposed to get pudding in it. Smithers was just some standard plant employee leading a tour. He wasn't Mr. Burns' little lackey. Well, he wasn't like the sycophantic lackey he is now. Of course, Mr. Burns himself, not being cartoonishly antiquated with his ahoy hoy and needing to send a letter via autogyro to the King of Prussia via Machu Picchu. Okay, so, and then things such as Homer went from a well-meaning but somewhat goofy dad, down on his luck dad, to a complete doofus who is just very easily entertained, very easily enthralled, and gets into increasingly ridiculous situations throughout. Bart went from just mischievous little kind of class clown to borderline criminal, and Lisa ends up becoming a vegetarian, who's a massive know-it-all and just thrives on her grades, just thrives on those things. And of course, Marge is just trying to keep it all together in the face of, everything. Her husband doing what he does, constantly getting fired from work. As many times as Homer's gotten fired from the nuclear plant, he's got to have a punch card to get like a free sub or something at the end of it. I was probably about 8 or 9 when the show premiered, and I've loved it ever since. It used to be when it was on. It started on Sunday nights, then for a long time went to Thursday nights. Now it's back on. It's been back on Sundays for probably about 20 years or so. Um, and that used to be a family thing. Thursday nights or whatever, Sunday nights, we'd all gather around the TV and we'd watch the series. Um, it's a great show. It's evolved with the times, obviously. Um, a lot of it is very quotable, as you might say, very memorable. Um, and it's just, I've seen a lot of episodes a lot of times, okay? Because they used to be in reruns a lot. Now I have Disney Plus, so I can rewatch the Living Daylights out of things. And many classic episodes. They've got the Halloween specials, which are hilarious. Um, and but as I said, sensibilities have changed. The show has evolved with things. They've added characters. They've removed characters for various reasons, i.e., the performers passing away or quitting the shows, such as Phil Hartman. They got rid of the kind of background in Troy McClure and who you might remember from such films as Hercules and the Erotic Awakenings of S, and Lionel Hutz, the possibly worst lawyer ever to exist. Works on contingency? No, money down. To just actors quitting because of contract disputes, hence why they got rid of Maud Flanders. I have a lot of personal favorites in the show. A couple of them you can't, at least one of them you can't see anymore because of these changing sensibilities. They have recast characters just because, once again, things have changed. They did get rid of Apu because he was considered more of a caricature of anything, and it just wasn't an accurate portrayal these days of people from India and the South Asian region. One episode that's gotten entirely scrubbed, though, was the season 3 premiere, Stark Raving Dad. The main reason being it guest starred Michael Jackson, who, let's just say, especially in years past, has not had a kind light shined on him. Essentially, the episode was Homer has to wear a pink shirt to work because the laundry got ruined, and he gets branded as kind of an upstart and a rebel at the plant. So Mr. Burns has him, of course, shipped off to a mental asylum. One of my only favorite gags from that episode, that I will always remember, is the family goes to visit. As the doctor's going to take Marge to visit Homer, he says, "The rest of you are free to wander the grounds. One of our patients is a cannibal. Try to guess which one." And then, of course, Homer having to get a certificate that says not insane, and then having to scrub the hand stamp on his hand that says insane off, yelling at it, going, "Come on, come off. I'm sane now." And Michael Jackson voiced a character named Leon Kapowski who believed he was Michael Jackson. So, of course, through the miracle of TV, Homer, of course, gets him discharged because I think he was just there voluntarily. And when you do commit yourself, you can leave voluntarily if you're there voluntarily. And, of course, everybody thinks he's Michael Jackson and then freaks out when he doesn't bring Michael Jackson, quote-unquote, home. So, essentially the episode. You can't find it on any streaming services. The only way you can watch it now, period, is if you have the season on DVD. From the DVD sets that were released many years ago. You can't even, they won't show it in reruns, nothing. That was always a fun one to see, because of some of the good jokes. Camp Krusty was another good one, where Bart and Lisa go to summer camp at Camp Krusty, and it turns out it is not what they were expecting. It's basically an absolute hellhole run by the nefarious Mr. Black, who employs the school bullies Jimbo, Dolph, and Kearney as counselors. Again, not the best of ideas for child welfare. And finally, after Bart leads kind of an uprising in the camp, Krusty shows up to say, to try to make amends and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to give you guys the rest of these last 2 weeks. We're going to make it amazing. And how does he do that? He takes a busload of miners to Tijuana, because that's not a bunch of lawsuits waiting to happen. That is definitely not a bunch of lawsuits waiting to happen. Some of my other favorites were Simpson Tide, which was a season 9 episode, if I'm counting correctly. Homer gets fired from the plant because plot point, and he immediately joins the Navy Reserve. And because of his many years as a nuclear technician, he's put on a nuclear sub with, I'm guessing, little to no training because it's a cartoon and suspension of disbelief. So through a series of, Homer-esque things happening, he ends up in command of the submarine, mostly because the captain was fired out of a torpedo tube while cleaning it out of all the donuts, chips, and beer that Barney stored in there, because Barney, Moe, and Apu all joined with him and all somehow got stationed on the submarine with him. Homer tries to steer the submarine home, of course takes a wrong turn and starts heading towards Russia. So they take that as an act, the U.S. takes it, of course, as an act of treason and goes after him. And he uses the same explanation he did when he got caught putting a donut in a reactor in the beginning of the episode to get fired from the plant. It's my first day. And, of course, all the navies that are surrounding him are like, oh, yeah, it's your first day. Okay, cool. So, of course, he gets court-martialed, but all of his plot twist, all the guys sitting on the court-martial tribunal were all being indicted for other things, so they couldn't try him. So he was off the hook with a dishonorable discharge. Now, I'm a military man, and if you get a dishonorable discharge, that basically ruins you for life. But of course, somehow he gets his dishonorable discharge from the Navy Reserve and goes back to work at the nuclear plant, no harm, no foul, which, I don't know about you, if I tried to stuff a donut to make it giant into a nuclear reactor, I would probably be in jail. It does include one of my most favorite, couple of my favorite bits, such as when the captain is addressing the crew before they get onto the submarine. And he says, do you have any questions? Homer raises his hand and says, is the poop deck really what I think it is? And, of course, the captain thinks it's funny, thinks it's a joke. He's like, you know what? I like the cut of your jib. And Homer's like, what's a jib? Which the captain says, promote that man. Full disclosure, that's how I got promoted in the Navy. Twice. The other one being the commercial that draws Homer to the U.S. Navy Reserve. It starts out with something really serious, daybreak, Jakarta. The proud men and women of the United States Navy are fighting for your freedom. You're in Lubbock, Texas, posing the stains off a monument. You're in the U.S. Navy Reserve, America's 17th line of defense, between the Mississippi National Guard and the League of Women Voters. After basic training, you only work 1 weekend a month, and most of that time, you're drunk off your ass. I mean, that's semi-accurate description of the reserves, but, I wasn't always drunk off my ass every drill weekend. Only some. My personal favorite, and if you can't tell what it is from the title of my podcast show, is the season 7, 21st episode of season 7, 22 short films about Springfield, which features short interconnected stories of various citizens of Springfield, such as Lisa getting gum in her hair and the various things that Marge and other Springfield adults decide are good things to put in the hair to get the gum out, instead of just, hey, let's clip out that little bit of hair that's got the gum. No, let's put mayonnaise in her hair, gravy, ice, other stuff, and she eventually gets her hair done. But you have that. You have Dr. Nick being Dr. Nick. Uh, but the part of it that, of course, inspired all this, Skinner and the Superintendent. If you've not seen it, just look up Skinner and the Superintendent or Steamed Hams on YouTube, because you can find the full bit. Essentially, Superintendent Chalmers goes to Principal Skinner's house for lunch. Skinner burns the roast, decides he's going to change out he's going to go buy some Krusty Burgers and disguise it as his own cooking. And then when Superintendent Chalmers says, well, wait a minute, you said we were having steamed clams. He says, no, steamed hams. That's what I call hamburgers. And his lies start getting more and more ridiculous. And Chalmers is kind of like, huh? Oh, okay, but you just said this. Finally, Skinner kind of gets him to leave when he realizes the entire kitchen is on fire at that point, because God forbid you turn off the roast or anything that's already burning in your oven. Let your entire kitchen burn. And when Chalmers says, what's going on in there? That's where the famous Aurora Borealis. At which point, Chalmers says, Aurora Borealis, at this time of day, or this time of year, this time of day, in this part of the country, localized entirely within your kitchen. Yes? May I see it? No. So he's walking him out the door. Skinner's mother is screaming that the house is on fire. And he's like, no, Mother, just the Northern Lights. So, as you can see where I got my steamed hams from. I mean, if you happen to visit my Twitch channel, Steamed Hams 81 on Twitch, you'll notice that a lot of my stuff is Simpsons themed, mostly towards the steamed hams gag. Now, the Halloween specials are something else to talk about. There have been, I want to say, about 20 of them at this point, if not more. The first, 6 or 7 were just gold, more or less. Well, the first one was still finding its legs, so it wasn't as great. But from the second one on, they've all at least had one of the 3 stories just be something top-notch. They've usually, for the most part, have had a wraparound the first few seasons. After that, we just zip to the stories. My personal favorites are like Bart Simpson's Dracula, which was the Bram Stoker's Dracula spoof with Mr. Burns as Dracula, including one of my absolute favorite lines from the series. Oh, Lisa, you and your stories. Bart is a vampire. Beer kills brain cells. Now let's go back to that building thingy where our Benson TV is. The Shinning, which is the Shining parody, which another one of my favorites. No TV and no beer make Homer something something. Go crazy? Don't mind if I do. Nightmare on Evergreen Terrace, which was the Nightmare on Elm Street spoof, where they have the misprinted school calendars, Smarch, which is something I use in real life. I always, when the weather's bad, I say, lousy Smarch weather. And then there was the sign on the thermostat that said, do not touch Willie. To which Homer replied, do not touch Willie. Good advice. As he cranks that sucker up and starts the fire in the boiler room. Dial Z for Zombie, which was their Night of the Living Dead spoof. Dad, you killed the zombie Flanders. He was a zombie. And of course, Clown Without Pity, which is where Homer buys a possessed Krusty Krusty doll for Bart for his birthday, and it turns out to want to murder Homer, and nobody believes him. Where Homer goes into the little curio shop, and he gets into this exchange with the proprietor about, he says everything carries a terrible curse in here, but it comes with a free Frogurt. But the Frogurt's also cursed. Well, it comes to your choice of topping, but the toppings contain potassium benzoate, which Homer's like, that's good, that's bad, that's good. When it comes to the toppings contain a dangerous chemical, nothing. Just, huh? And yeah, these honestly were top notch. I loved them. After I would say about the eighth or ninth one, the quality was always mixed. There were some that were good but not memorable. But there were some that were just like, eh. Another thing that Simpsons actually brought to the thing was their songs. They've had quite a few good songs come out of this series, such as the Monorail song from Marge versus the Monorail, which my wife has caught me singing and dancing to as the episode was on, complete with jazz hands. No, there's no video of this. Don't even ask. There's the Camp Krusty anthem. There is See My Vest, which is the one where, from the episode where Santa's little helper gets a female dog pregnant. She has a litter. Mr. Burns steals the puppies because he wants to make a coat out of the puppies, the 101 Dalmatians thing. There was See My Vest. There was an entire musical episode. There was all the stuff with Sherry Bobbins, the Mary Poppins parody. With Do a Half-Assed Job and stuff like that. It was great. Hey, her butt whacks the banister. I'm trying to think of a couple. They've had some good songs that I will sit and I will sing, and my wife is just like, "What goes on in your head?" And I'm like, "Constant loop of The Simpsons." Okay. There was the Canyonero jingle, which I will gladly just belt out randomly, and nobody gets. They've also added words to the American lexicon and have actually made it into the dictionary, such as embiggen, which, if you guess, just makes, says, enlarging, something like that. Or cromulent, which you may have gotten from the title of this episode, a perfectly cromulent episode about The Simpsons, means perfectly adequate. There's another one I use. I use Jeebus instead of using Jesus' name in vain. I'm not a particularly religious man, but Jeebus just seems like something that's not going to bother people. People used to get bothered by The Simpsons when it first came on. It was quote unquote edgy, not as edgy anymore because I think, people get offended by things all the time, but still, they've had many crossovers with other Fox series. They've had cameos from Hank and Peggy from King of the Hill. You're going to see Bender in there once in a while. I think Bender's made a couple of little appearances. They did have this weird crossover with a show from the early mid-90s called The Critic. Started out on ABC, moved over to Fox for, I think, a season. And it was about a terrible film critic in New York who took his job too seriously. And he gets invited out to Springfield to judge a film festival, to which one of the best movies in there was, oddly enough, Man Getting Hit with Football, which featured Hans Moleman, the little old guy that you see wander around The Simpsons with the big thick glasses, just stand outside his house and just gets absolutely drilled in the junk with a football. And somehow becomes so popular that a big budget version was made with Hans being played by George C. Scott, and it wins the Oscar. I would vote for it. It's a great movie. I mean, straightforward. Dude gets hit in the junk with football. What else can you ask for? And I remember back, celebrities used to be clamoring to get on this show. There was a wait list to cameo either as yourself or to play like a one off character or maybe a parody of yourself. You've had stars like Mel Gibson uh, when he enlisted Homer's help to fix his remake of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and ended up angering studio executives. And that wasn't even the worst that angered studio executives, but you've had at the time all three living Beatles, starting with Ringo Starr in an early episode where he cameoed as himself, replying to fan mail from Marge from a painting that she had sent him of him that she had made 20 years prior and he was just getting now, to Paul McCartney in the episode where Lisa becomes a vegetarian. And then, of course, George Harrison in the B Sharps episode, which Homer's Barbershop Quartet, their whole rise and fall basically mirrors the Beatles. He meets George Harrison at a party, and of course is more enthralled with the fact that George Harrison has a brownie, and where does he get it? Which means there was a George Harrison music video that was playing on MTV, which, yes, MTV has a channel that still plays music videos, shockingly. It's MTV Classic. It was the song Set on You, and the only thing I could think about when I saw that and I realized who it was, I said, oh my god, it's George Harrison. Where did he get that brownie? It's the only thing I can think of with that song. Because that's me. And you get some celebrities, just, again, Michael Jackson, you had Dustin Hoffman. Some celebrities weren't entirely enthralled with their portrayals. I want to say the big one in recent memory was Morrissey. If you don't know who Morrissey is, he was the frontman for an 80s English rock band called The Smiths. Look him up. Don't say I didn't warn you. He's a prick, to say the least. He's a militant vegetarian to the point of, if he's performing in a venue, if it's like, say, a festival where there's like multiple acts playing, when it's his turn to go on stage, any concession selling meat has to shut down. And I'm like, but bro, I want my hot dog, bro. I don't even want to watch you. You suck. But what are you gonna do? He got mighty pissed because they portrayed. So what happens in the episode is Lisa ends up discovering an artist named Quillaby, which was voiced by Benedict Cumberbatch. It was supposed to be a spoof of him, and he had all these like "Meat is Murder" songs, and I'm just angsty blah 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 songs. And so she kind of starts having an imaginary friend that is this idealized version of him from the 80s. And she finally gets tickets to a festival that says that the real Quillaby is playing at. And she's excited to go see him live. Come to find out, he's no longer the slender, good-looking, handsome rebel. He's this fat, slovenly, angry, racist, xenophobic dickhead. And he straight out says, yeah, this concert's a cash grab. I am broke from suing everybody who were saying terrible things about me that were absolutely right. And he proceeds to eat a pastrami sandwich, because he's no longer a vegetarian, and proceeds to sing a song about how much he hates immigrants, which someone points out, but you're an immigrant. And which made him just get mad and throw a temper tantrum and have to get dragged off stage by the road crew. Him and his manager made it no secret that they were not enthralled with the episode. I personally think that if you are a public figure, you're ripe for parody. Someone wants to point out that you're a bit of a jerk, just take it with a grain of salt, maybe learn from it, laugh it off. You know, they went on George Bush Sr. because he had, during his presidency, had mentioned that the Simpsons were a bit of a bad influence on everybody. Not entirely true, but then again, we weren't as edgy as we are now, apparently. So they had him move across the street from the Simpsons after he became a private citizen again. And it was less picking on his politics, which they avoided entirely, and just picked on his crotchetiness. Um, Basically making it more of a Dennis the Menace episode. Bart is just aggravating Mr. Burns to the point, or not Mr. Burns, sorry, President Bush. Wrong old guy. To the point where George Sr. spanks Bart out of being mad at him. So then this ignites a whole feud with Homer, and it gets, again, more ridiculous because it's The Simpsons. And yeah, I mean, they even parodied the '96 election with having Bob Dole and Bill Clinton kidnapped by Kang and Kodos, replaced. And even after Kang and Kodos are found out, they're like, well, you got to kind of vote for one of us, which comes to the phrase I use often, like, don't blame me. I voted for Kodos. The Simpsons has been quite the long-running series. It's a great series. I don't see it ending anytime in the near future. It's going to keep going, and I'd love to introduce newer and newer generations to it. I will always continue to enjoy this show. I will watch it in reruns in perpetuity. And there you have it. My love for The Simpsons, encapsulated in roughly 30 minutes. And that is the end of that chapter. Now, for this week's Plug and Play. Kind of going out theme a bit, I am going to be plugging the Simpsons arcade game. Basically, it was made in like 91. Again, the characters weren't like wholly fleshed out, so the basic premise is Smithers is escaping from a diamond heist. He bumps into the Simpsons. Maggie takes his prized diamond as a pacifier, so he of course kidnaps Maggie, and the rest of the family has to go rescue her. He was committing this diamond heist for Mr. Burns, of course, because characters weren't entirely fleshed out. It's a fun game. I have it on my Xbox 360. It used to be available on various platforms like the Xbox, PlayStation, but due to rights issues, it was delisted a few years ago. Thankfully, I still have it downloaded so I can play it on my 360. You can still play it in the arcades if you can find it in an arcade. Also available as an arcade 1-up, but a 4-player stand-up is like $600, so hopefully you got some cashola. But I do highly recommend the Simpsons arcade game if you ever get a shot at it. It's a lot of fun, it's goofy, and it has some deep-cut references for those of us Simpsons fans who kind of know a thing or two. Well, that's it for the Unforgettable Luncheon. I hope a good time was had by all, and I will see you again soon. Wait a minute! You didn't learn how World War II ended. We won!